This is Covering the Spread, part of the FanDuel Podcast Network.
Even though the headliner of Week 6 is already in the books with the Commanders at the Bears, where there's still, I guess, some okay games left on tap. We got Bills, Chiefs, I suppose, Cowboys, Eagles, some kind of good games. We're going to break those down from a prop betting perspective and let you know where Zachariason is seeing value this week over at FanDuel Sportsbook. This is Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com, joined here as I am each Friday by Zachariason. Find him on Twitter at LateRoundQB. Check out his work at LateRound.com and the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. JJ, it is Week 6. I'm sorry I couldn't get you on to talk about Brian Robinson, Cole Kmet props, but I guess nice consolation for you this week. How you doing?
I feel like I probably would have gone overs with Brian Robinson. Did they not hit? They didn't cash, did they?
48.5. He went over. He
did. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was watching that game and because I had 48.5 and I was like, they were about to go down 7 points. It's like, okay, it's about to be a McKissick script and we sad because I had Commanders money line too. I was like, I'm going to lose this game, lose this Robinson prop. And then Velus Jones, man, he was looking out for me. So Velus, thank you. I appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, I wonder how Bears Reddit is feeling about me right now, because back during draft time, I was not very high on Velus Jones, and they destroyed me verbally on the internet.
It's never happened before, though, right?
Never. But yeah, I mean, it's very strange. This show, I've had some pretty the props that I've picked for this show have not been the best this year. Running kind of cold right now. Been playing it, like last week, touchdown props. I usually just get kind of wild because it's fun. But this week I'm going to play it a little bit safer and smarter, and hopefully get some dubs.
Well, I think there's been a lot of value in the situations to monitor section we talked about. Like you talked about Josh Jacobs last week before he goes for like a career high in every single category. I had his receiving prop for that game in part because of our discussion. And so that section specifically has been pretty good. And we'll be talking about that again. And we'll kind of go through a similar process for Bills Chiefs specifically in just a bit. But first, a reminder to make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Also up on the FanDuel YouTube page as they are posted there. So subscribe to the FanDuel YouTube page and Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. Twisted Tea and FanDuel have joined forces to bring you a one-of-a-kind contest series. It gives you a chance to compete for your share of thousands of dollars in site credit. Introducing Twisted Tea's College Football Picks, a sports betting focused contest series that's entirely free to play. The contest is simple. Each college football game will be assigned money line, spread, and total markets with assigned points each market. All you have to do is make 6 selections based on those 3 markets and earn points for each correct selection you made. If at the end of the day, your score ranks among the best in the contest, you'll be eligible for your share of site credit. Head to FanDuel.com/TwistedTeaPicks and make your picks. And remember, please drink responsibly. Now, I'll talk about the Bills and Chiefs specifically in a second here, JJ, but I did want to talk to you more broadly about the impact of these higher leverage games. We can see teams take a different approach when the game truly, truly matters. And that's true for both Bills, Chiefs, and Eagles, Cowboys. How do you alter your approach for betting props in those games, knowing that teams might pull out a couple extra stops in order to win that kind of a matchup?
Yeah, I think the one thing you can do is look at the playoffs and what we typically see in the playoffs, because obviously they're doing whatever they possibly can to not get eliminated. And one of the things that you and I have done successfully well, through the years is looking at quarterback rushing and laying props down there, whether it's a quarterback rushing touchdown. Remember the Mahomes touchdown in the Super Bowl 1 year. Yeah, the first touchdown. Stuff like that. If you're able to hit the overs a little bit more with those quarterbacks, I do think that's a logical approach. The other thing though too is a lot of these teams will save players, specifically running backs, when games get moderately out of hand. Wide receivers will generally leave the field whenever games get out of hand, and there's crazy game scripts and such. But running backs are the ones who we typically we'll see leave the field first, because backup running backs are a little bit more replaceable. And sometimes teams just want those backups to get some run just in general. And so when games are tighter, and we'll get to this in a second, when games are tighter, there are some running backs who are a little bit more attractive in those games because these teams are typically good. They're leading. They have these positive scripts, and they're able to get these other running backs a little bit more work than they otherwise would. So definitely pay attention to the running back backfield share, snap shares as well. But then, quarterbacks, I think are the big things because they'll throw their bodies around more whenever these games just matter more. It's one of those things that is not necessarily as quantifiable as some of the other things that we typically approach or talk about and think about. But you can look at playoff numbers and see that quarterbacks are running the ball more. They get better rushing yards. And it's really just because they're doing whatever it takes. And I think that you could see that this weekend in some of these big games.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes early in that game against the Bills in the playoffs last year was running quite a bit. A lot of scrambles for him in that one. I checked out his touchdown prop. It's 5-1. That's not super forgivable, honestly. Yeah. Josh Allen is plus 130, so it's kind of a nope. Exactly. You're not taking this one. But maybe we'll get some value in the running backs in that game. So let's talk about the Bills at the Chiefs. So you were talking about running backs being used differently. 38-3 for the Bills might be a bit different than hopefully what we see in this game. So that might relate to some props in this one. But let's talk about the Bills-Chiefs game specifically. Not a lot of props up at FanDuel yet for that game. But when you're looking at this game broadly, what are you keying in on? Any situations you're looking at to potentially grab some props once they are posted?
Yeah. So, I just mentioned the running back stuff and how teams might use running backs a little bit differently in these types of games. And you can just kind of look at how, Buffalo is a really good example. You can look at how Buffalo's used Devin Singletary this season. In tighter games this year, he's just been on the field more. They've used James Cook more in garbage time. But his best usage games, Devin Singletary's best usage games, were Miami and Baltimore, 2 non-blowouts for Buffalo this year. In quarters 1-3, Singletary has a 72% snap share this year, which is really good. And then in the fourth quarter, it's 46%. And that just goes to show that Buffalo is a good team who can blow teams out. And when they do that, Devin Singletary is not on the field. Devin Singletary is their RB1. I do think that his usage is probably going to be pretty strong in this game, given the fact that it should be a back and forth, hopefully close game and hopefully competitive game. And then you can look at the other side too, with the running back position. I've talked about this plenty on this show and on other shows, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire has now out-snapped Jerick McKinnon once this year, which is crazy because he's still seeing better usage and the backfield share is better than what Jerick McKinnon's has been. But McKinnon's numbers aren't significantly far off in terms of just general volume on the ground and through the air versus Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I mean, where they're seeing touches is a little bit different. Edwards-Helaire obviously has had some regression coming, for a while, and it's just going to continue that way. He's not going to maintain the receiving touchdowns that he was seeing, but that's definitely something to keep an eye on because I think that in a game like this, if you look at the one game where Clyde Edwards-Helaire saw a lot of work, it was that game against Tampa Bay, another just primetime game, bigger game. I don't think it's as obvious as what we're going to see from Buffalo with their running back usage because I think Andy Reid literally just wants a rotation. Like this is just the way that this backfield is. Whereas with Buffalo, you're looking at Devin Singletary and you're saying a 72% snap share. He could hit a 3/4 snap share in this big game. That's a really, really big deal. And then the last thing I want to touch on, obviously both Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen can push the ball down the field. But Mahomes this year has actually been below average in 15+ air yard rate. Obviously he, last year and a half, 2 years, he's just doing what the defense is giving him and playing into that. Josh Allen in terms of 15+ air yard rate has been pretty average. So they're not pushing the ball down the field with insane frequency, right? And so far this year, Kansas City and Buffalo both rank in the bottom 5 in 15+ air yard rate allowed. So they're both teams that have not allowed these deep balls to happen very frequently. Now, some of that could be, when a defense is playing in a positive game script, the opposing, the defense is going to play a little bit more prevent and play a little bit safer because they don't want to give up those big plays. And so the opposing quarterbacks are just kind of dinking and dunking, which is sort of what we saw with Kenny Pickett a little bit last week. And what we've seen, we just see that with these quarterbacks against these teams. But I do think it's at least interesting to think about in this context, because I think everyone just assumes that it's going to be big play after big play, which is very, very possible. Of course it's possible. You're talking about two of the best arms and best quarterbacks in football. But so far this season, and even, extended to last season a little bit, these two teams, aren't necessarily pushing the ball down the field as frequently as you might think. And then the defenses are also actually playing pretty well against that deep ball pass.
Yeah, and the Bills specifically tend to play a lot of like too high defenses. That's what last year led to the Chiefs kind of being more conservative in terms of this year. It has not been the case because they don't have guys who can get open against man coverage. So teams are like, okay, feel free, try to beat us because you can't. And it's be a different approach this week too, but that approach is going to be more conducive to underneath stuff in that situation too. So despite it being a different defense, same approach there. And the Chiefs just played a lot of too high as well. Now, we did see Gabe Davis say, double barrel middle fingers to that last year, just kind of running past both the safeties like, haha, I can do this. But I think that overall mindset makes a lot of sense. With Singletary, going back to him, he had 90 plus yards in scrimmage in both those tighter script games. Are you looking at a rushing plus receiving prop? Is that kind of the first place you're looking to see if there's value there? Or what do you think, like a receiving prop? What do you think where are you looking first, I should say?
Yeah, I'd probably say a rushing plus receiving only because, game script can go in a lot of different ways. Like if this is a true shootout, then I would still expect Singletary to be the primary receiving back in that offense. And so, you're not really having to choose whether or not this is going to be, this like super high scoring game or not. So I think it's just safer to go with the combination of the two. But I do think that you could make the argument that both, depending on where that line sits, you could make the argument that both rushing and receiving is probably a decent thing to at least analyze and look at for Singletary.
For sure. Especially if, the Chiefs are playing back, it could be a situation where the Bills at least try to run on that kind of defense as well. Okay, let's go to the situations to target. As mentioned, that's been kind of a productive area this year. You talked about Ramondre Stevenson a couple weeks ago. Josh Jacobs last week as being a guy to go to. When you're looking for evolving situations, which ones stand out to you for this week?
Yeah, this kind of stuff is usually running back focused because running backs at the end of the day, it's a coaching decision. Coaches say we want to throw you on the field or we don't want to throw you on the field. And there's two stud running backs right now who are seeing their backup sort of take more and more work from them, at least over the last couple of weeks. You have Dalvin Cook and Leonard Fournette. So, the first 2 weeks of the season, Dalvin Cook was at about a 75% snap rate, really good snap rate. That's been closer to 60% over the last 2 weeks. Given that shoulder. So Alexander Madison's getting a little bit more run. Dalvin Cook is not as a result of that. And I know, Dalvin Cook still had a great game last week and he's still going to produce. It's not like he's going to be irrelevant, but I do think that given the fact that you can pinpoint one specific thing happening, which is the shoulder injury, as to why his snap share has declined, I think that's something that you definitely should monitor and realize that it's real and happening. With Leonard Fournette, first 3 weeks, 76% snap share, 87% snap share, 91% snap share. So 3 very, very good numbers. Last 2 weeks, 61%, 62%. They vocally said that they wanted to get Rachaad White more involved in the offense. That is exactly what they've been doing. So again, both Lenny and Dalvin are good players and they're going to still see good production. But I do think that you should keep an eye on the backups there, like Alexander Madison and Rachaad White, especially a guy like Rachaad White this week going up against Pittsburgh, an easy defense, a defense they can beat, and they're 8.5 point road favorites. If they do hit that positive game script, you could see more Rachaad White in that game as a result. So it's definitely something to monitor, definitely something to keep an eye on because both Fournette and Dalvin Cook are seeing decreased snap rates.
Yeah, I was pretty heavy on Dalvin last week and in DFS, and I felt very lucky to get out with 2 touchdowns in that game. I don't think I deserve that based on, because his role got worse. I thought that the decreased snap rate in week 4 was a 1 week anomaly because of the shoulder injury. And it turns out, no, it was not. So I felt very lucky to get out of that game with what I got based on what was happening there. Okay. Let's take a look at some yardage props for week number 6. Where are you seeing value right now in the yardage categories?
Let's look at Zach Ertz. You have this Seattle-Arizona game that should be pretty high scoring this week. Just given the slate, which is wild that we're saying that with the Geno Smith-led team, but he's crushing it right now. I mean, the man is balling out. Zach Ertz's line is 48.5 receiving yards. I'm taking the over there, actually. Ertz has hit 55 or more receiving yards in each game since week 1. And in week 1, it was that blowout loss against Kansas City. He only played 60% of Arizona's snaps. Every other game, he's been in at least 82%. So he's playing a lot more than that week 1 game. He now has a 22% target share per game over his last 4, which is a very, very good target share for a tight end. Seattle's also been horrific against the tight end position. They've allowed the most tight end receiving yards this season. We Obviously, that's skewed a little bit towards because of that TJ Hawkinson game where he went absolutely bonkers against them. But Denver tight ends in week 1 had 85 yards against them. Ross Dwelly hit 38. Kyle Pitts even had a good game against this Seattle defense. He had 87 yards against them. So given the fact that Zach Ertz has basically been around this line over the last month, now he gets this plus matchup in a higher scoring game and in a good game environment. I think going over that 48.5 mark makes a lot of sense for Zach Ertz this week.
Yeah, with Zach Ertz, I thought maybe with Rondale Moore being back, because like in week 4, Ertz's role took a tiny step back, 6 targets there, but Rondale Moore fully active with AJ Green last week as well, and Ertz bounced back with 10 targets there. So I think it was kind of a confirmation that no, this is not a product of not having Rondale Moore. It was just Zach Ertz is involved in this offense for sure.
And interestingly enough, Rondale, whenever he first came back without AJ Green, that was a game where Greg Dortch was playing the slot still, and Rondale was on the outside. And then this past week, Rondale's playing the slot again, which would cannibalize that work with Zach Ertz, in the middle of the field a little bit, and it didn't. And so, I think, but I mean, look, from just like a regular like season long standpoint, like I like Rondale Moore too. But Zach Ertz, I think this line this is basically what we would project in a neutral environment, neutral, just general matchup. But in this matchup, I think he's got to go over that.
Yeah. Zach Ertz, 48.5 receiving yards there. Which other ones are you seeing from a yardage perspective that you're seeing value right now?
Yeah, we're going to go to James Robinson. This is technically another one of those situations that you could be monitoring because over the last couple of weeks, we've seen Travis Etienne play more snaps than Robinson. But a lot of that is game script related. I mean, this is something that we've been talking about basically all season long, where Jacksonville's good. If they're leading, James Robinson's going to be on the field. He's the early down back. If they're trailing, they're going to go to the receiving back, Travis Etienne. And that's just the way that it is. But I do think that we could see a shift between James Robinson and Travis Etienne sooner rather than later. James Robinson, look, we all want him to crush it. I mean, he's coming off a horrific injury for a football player, but he has not been very good efficiency-wise. He's been the second worst running back in football in terms of success rate. That's numberFire's expected points model that's generating that. Only Najee Harris has been worse. And the two guys that are right ahead of him are Joe Mixon and Cam Akers. And if you were to poll football fans and say, who have been the 3 worst running backs in football this year, they'd probably say Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, and Cam Akers. And James Robinson is right there with them. Meanwhile, Travis Etienne has a success rate that's 12 percentage points higher than what James Robinson has seen. He's just been better, like flat out. He's just been better. So the line here, this is over on DK. It's 40.5 rushing yards. It's at minus 130. So it's not like the best juice in the world necessarily, but I do like the under, against a Colts team also that's been very, very good against running backs. They have the 4th best success rate allowed to the running back position this season. And Robinson's hit that. He's hit 29 and 27 rushing yards over his last 2. So this is not a number where you look at it and you say, oh, they're baking in the fact that Travis Etienne might see more work or might end up seeing more work. This is a line where, it's basically being projected that, not only that, but Jacksonville could also trail in this game, right? This is not a lock that they would win it. So I think there's a lot working against James Robinson right now is basically what I'm getting at. And then the other one, the last one, this one's kind of a deep cut, but I think it makes some sense. I think there's some logic here. Caleb Huntley, who some of you might not have even heard of before. He has a line of 26.5 rushing yards over on DK, minus 115. I like the under there. The reason I saw this even was I was looking at Tyler Allgeier's line because this matchup is kind of interesting from the standpoint of, last week they play Tampa Bay. And I think there's this stigma and idea that Tampa Bay is really, really good at stopping the run, which they have been over the last like 2 or 3 years. But this season so far, they've actually ranked 26th in success rate allowed to opposing running backs. And so Tyler Allgeier last week, he plays 60% of the team snaps. He sees like a 55-ish% running back rush share. His usage was fine as like a 1A in a committee backfield. And so I was looking at that. And I was like, well, the matchup's a lot better against San Francisco this week because they're the second best team against running backs in success rate. So maybe we should take the under with Allgeier. And then I see Caleb Huntley sitting there at 26.5 rushing yards. And I was like, that seems a little bit too high.
A gift.
Yeah. Caleb Huntley played only 24% of their snaps last week. He saw a third of the team's running back rushes. I just don't think Atlanta is going to be nearly as effective on the ground in this game against San Francisco. And then on top of that, Atlanta's been a very, 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 very run heavy team so far this year, like both in neutral game scripts and just overall ratio and the way that they've been throwing the ball. It's something that will regress. I mean, it's something that we don't see and what we haven't seen over the last decade sustained for an entire season. So I do think we're going to see a little bit more throwing. And then on top of that, San Francisco actually ranks first in adjusted target share allowed to running backs this season, which means teams aren't doing well with running backs on the ground, but they're using them through the air against San Francisco a little bit. So we could see that happen. So I wouldn't go with like a total yardage prop with any of these backs, but I do think from a rushing yardage standpoint, it makes a lot of sense to hit the under.
Yeah, I think the Bucs point is very important with regards to expectation setting for what teams do against them, because they lost Ndamukong Suh, signed Akeem Hicks, but Akeem Hicks got hurt in week 2. So it's a very different defense than we've seen in the past. And like, they still want to stop the run, but their ability to do so is not as absurd as it was previously.
They also have a great pass defense, so teams aren't necessarily going to attack them that way.
Right, exactly. Okay, what about touchdown props? What are you seeing there for week 6?
I've got one touchdown prop this week. Ramondre Stevenson over on DK right now is currently plus money to score a touchdown. And if you look at basically any other book, you're not going to have plus money for Ramondre Stevenson to score a touchdown. Damian Harris over on DK is actually both he and Damian Harris are at plus 105. And so Damian Harris right now, according to NFL Network, there was a report earlier this week saying that he's probably going to miss multiple games. He is limited in practice right now. He's not technically out yet.
Don't buy into
that.
Chances are they're just jacking with you. Like I got so mad when I saw Wednesday. I was like, you had to know they were going to do that.
You're right. So he's been limited in practice. He's almost definitely not going to go. Like we can't say definitely because it's not official yet, but I would be shocked if Damian Harris plays this week. Not only that, but the Patriots signed Kevin Harris, who was a rookie that they drafted after Pierre Strong in this year's NFL draft. So now they have, Pierre Strong and Kevin Harris behind Ramondre Stevenson. Stevenson has been playing, passing down work. This is something that we've been talking about on the show a lot. He's basically seeing 2/3 of the team's backfield share, if not more, in some of these games. Obviously Damian Harris gets hurt last week, so it was a little bit more. And then you have a matchup against Cleveland. Cleveland's been one of the worst teams in football against running backs this year. They've allowed the 5th most rushing yards of the position. They're bottom 10 in success rate allowed to the position. So if Harris is out, which I think is probably 98-99% chance, if Harris is out, Stevenson, I think, will be the bell cow in this game for New England, and getting him at plus 105 when we know that they're going to be more than likely a run heavy team in the red zone, I think is really, really good odds.
So that's at plus 105 at DK, minus 135 at FanDuel, minus 200 at FGM. If you can get that at plus money before Harris is ruled out, because he will be, I'm almost positive. Like, this could be freezing cold takes, but they had Mac freaking Jones practice on a high ankle sprain the Friday after he went down. They're just messing with you. It's the Patriot way, as always.
For sure.
All right. That is all that we have here for this week. JJ, though, want to give a big thank you for stopping by. Check out JJ at Late Round QB. Find his work at lateround.com, and check out the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast for all of your season-long needs as well. JJ, good luck to you week 6. We'll talk to you once again next week.
Thanks, Jim.
Make sure you are subscribed to Covering the Spread wherever you get your podcasts. We are, of course, on the FanDuel YouTube page as well. I'm on Twitter at Jim Sanas. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network College Football Week 7 preview with Ed Feng and Ben Stevens is up. We had Tom Vecchio on for Week 6 in the NFL for the full betting preview. Find all those on your podcast feed. Good luck to you this week. We'll talk to you once again Monday for some Monday Night Football action. This has been Covering the Spread right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network.